Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to confirm that we're talking about the budget resolution because it's there's a lot of talk about cuts and all kinds of things, but we're talking about a budget resolution right now. And you know, our colleagues are claiming that this resolution does a number of things that it doesn't actually do. And I do think it's important to point out that the real reason that we're here is because of the expiration of the Trump tax cuts. And it would result in the largest single tax increase on working families in recent history. My Democrat colleagues want to distract from the real impact of letting these tax provisions expire by talking about the millionaires and billionaires and not talking about the impact on the everyday Americans. In my district, a family of four making the median income in my district, which is around $70,000 a year, would see their taxes go up by more than $1,400. So if we let those Trump tax cuts expire, these are the real numbers. Over 100,000 families in my district would see their child tax credit slashed in half if the Trump tax cuts expire. And I'll tell you, I was in my district. I do talk to the folks in my district. And I was in my district this weekend, and there was a couple with a little baby in the corner, little baby with a pink hat on, so assuming it's a girl. And I said something about the tax, if the child tax cuts expire, child tax credits expire, and they nodded. They were like, don't let them expire, don't, you know, so they were very concerned about that. So this is real people, over 100,000 families in my district, and nearly 57,000 small businesses in my district would lose their small business deduction and would have to pay a rate of 43.4% tax rate. And over 29,000 family farms in my district would find it much harder to pass their way of life onto the next generation with when the death tax doubles if the Trump's tax cuts expire. So as we talk about those things, we need to make sure we're talking about facts and that we talk about what's happening to the people in our districts. And Chairman Arrington, I just wanted to, you know, I'd like to, obviously the other side's talking about a lot of things that aren't, that this will do or is doing that's not really. And so if you'd like to, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to some of the claims that this resolution is doing things it's not, if you want to.
Well, you mentioned the tax cuts, much maligned over the years, wrongfully, because what the Democrats failed to acknowledge is that more people were lifted out of poverty after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act than any other time in the history of our country. The median income actually went up by 5%. That's the most in 25 years. We had fewer people unemployed among the most vulnerable Americans in recorded history. We had more monies, American dollars, repatriated to the United States, invested to grow businesses, to create jobs, to create opportunities, to give hope for a better quality of life, a bigger paycheck. That's what happened. But they failed to talk about that. And in fact, when they criticized the tax cuts as a giveaway to the rich and corporations, they probably don't talk about the green energy tax subsidies to the climate-related corporations that was scored at $250 billion and ended up being about $700 to $800 billion in cost. But worst of all, it was distortive. It drove energy prices up, and it made us more dependent on foreign sources. And about 70%, according to some sources, of the value of those green energy corporate tax giveaways that the Democrats passed unilaterally, 70% of the value went to China because of the rare earth mineral mining, because of the component parts to many of the renewable energy endeavors. But when they criticized the TCJA back in the day, because these are tired, old, rhetorical and false claims, they said that this was a tax cut for the rich and corporations. The Washington Post fact check gave 4 Pinocchios. The Washington Post, they gave 4 Pinocchios saying this is simply wrong, clearly false. 3 of every $4 in the 2017 tax cuts went to individuals, cutting taxes for the lowest income by 10%, and the top 1% got a 0.5% tax cut. There are other, Washington Post said that the tax cuts going to the top 1% gave this false statement to Pinocchio's, calling it a zombie claim, galling. So even the Washington Post discredited these claims. But, you know, the American people are the best judge of this. They hear both sides. I'm not sure they believe necessarily any one party, including our own, sadly enough. But they believed in the effects and the results of the policies of President Trump and unified Republican leadership, in contrast to the 40-year high inflation, the cost of living crisis, a weaker economy, a nation closer to the precipice of a debt crisis, all because of $8 trillion in unbridled deficit spending and a $5 trillion additional cost in interest expense on the debt, which tripled under President Biden. I think the American people, Ms. Fishbach, made the ultimate decision and use their good judgment. And in this case, they trusted President Trump and Republicans to turn this economy around, to bend the curve on wasteful and unnecessary spending with a $2 trillion deficit and $36 trillion that will be heaped on the backs of our children. I think they believed and trusted in him and us to do this very thing. And it will be much maligned going forward. There'll be lots of false claims and fear-mongering. We've got to do what we know is right for our country, for our children's future, and for America's leadership in the world going into the better part of the 21st century. Thanks for letting me have that opportunity.
Thank you very much. And I will just sum it up. And what I think that my Democrat colleagues like to do is to distract from the real facts by talking about millionaires and billionaires and not the average American who will suffer if we don't extend these tax cuts. The tax cuts for the families in my district and in theirs, the tax cuts for the small businesses in my district and in theirs, and the tax cuts for the family farms. And I think we need to focus on that because the Democrats will continue to try to confuse and distract people with talking about millionaires and billionaires. And with that, I yield back.